did ping and it went off and you got
Behind the cover, yeah.
dismembered, decapitated. It's probably because you're trying to hide something and make sure certain details don't come out.
Tend to Life with Elise starts right now.
All right, I think we're up and running. Let's see. Hey guys, let me know if you can hear me okay. Sorry, I'm jumping on here very quickly and randomly, but let me know if you can hear me okay. We have got obviously a lot to go over. It looks like the site with the affidavit is crashing, so I downloaded it ahead of time, so I'm going to pull it up on the screen. I wasn't going to do a live, but then as I started reading it, I was like, holy shit, we really need to talk about this. Let's see. Okay, perfect. You guys can hear me. So sorry, I know this is like kind of bootleg, but I have my computer right here that I'm going to be using to share the screen. So let me pull this up, guys. So basically, we all know Bryan right now is in court. His hearing starts, I think, in approximately 26 minutes, but be it as it may, the affidavit has apparently been released. People have already gotten their hands on it. Somebody in Discord sent it over to me, and so I downloaded it before the site crashed. So I'm going to pull it up and share it with you guys. One of the biggest things that caught my eye, which I haven't even finished reading the entire thing. I got to like paragraph 3 and I was like, holy shit, I need to just go live about this. But one of the roommates, and please no shaming in the comment, no coming for this person, one of the roommates saw Bryan in the house as this was happening and was woken up, I believe it was 3 times, by noises and hearing somebody crying, which again, I don't want to victim blame here at all. So please be respectful in the comments. But you know, it's a little unbelievable. Let me put on slow mode because I know everybody's probably already freaking out about that right now. So let me just go ahead and do that for a second. Okay. And if it gets worse, we can take the trolls out as well. Also, for those of you who are mods and in Discord, I do not have my Discord app up right now. So if you need to get a hold of me urgently, text me. I'll have my phone with me doing that. So let me pull this up, guys, and we will read through it together. Okay. So here we go. And it has been redacted. So there are going to be details, of course, that we don't know, but it does have quite a bit of information. And I'm not monitoring the chat right now because I obviously am pulling this up on the screen and reading. So it says the below information is provided by Brett Payne, and who's the appointed qualified acting peace officer. So let's go into where the actual crime. So on November 13th, 2022, at approximately 4 p.m., the police department, Sergeant Blaker and I responded to the address here in Idaho to assist with scene security and the processing of a crime scene associated with 4 homicides. Upon our arrival, the Idaho State Police forensic team was on scene and was preparing to begin processing the scene. We go down a little further and it says they entered through the residence through the bottom floor door on the north side of the building. They then walked up to the second floor. OFC Smith directed me down the hallway to the west bedroom of the second floor, which I later learned through Xana's driver's license and other personal belongings found in the room was Xana's room. Just before this room, there was a bathroom door on the south wall of the hallway. As I approached the room, I could see a body, later identified as Xana, laying on the floor. She was deceased with wounds which appeared to have been caused by an edged weapon. Also in the room was a male, later identified as Ethan, and he was also deceased with wounds later determined through the autopsy, and it didn't go into details here. You can see this entire page there was redacted, which, let me just say, I know in my video yesterday, I shared some information from somebody very close to me who is apparently friends with somebody close to the investigation who outlined some of Ethan's wounds. That's all still alleged at this point. This page with those notes has been redacted, so I don't know if that was true or not. However, that person did tell me that the sheath was recovered at the scene, and it was, which we'll get into here, but it was located in a different location than what was reported to me. It was reported that the sheath was under Ethan's body, but it was actually next to one of the girls. So let's keep going here. So I then followed OFC Smith upstairs to the third floor of the residence. The third floor consisted of 2 bedrooms and 1 bathroom. The bedroom was on the west side of the floor, was later determined to be Kaylee's. I later learned that there was a dog in the room when the police officers initially responded. The dog belonged to Kaylee and her ex-boyfriend, Jack. I found out through my interview with Jack that he and Kaylee shared the dog. He then pointed out a small bathroom on the east side of the third floor. This bathroom shared a wall with Maddie and this with Maddie's bedroom. So then it goes over here. And guys, you can slow this down and pause if you want to read the whole thing. I'm just kind of trying to give you the highlights and summarize here. As I entered through the bedroom, I could see 2 females in the single bed of the room. Both Kaylee and Maddie were deceased with visible stab wounds. I also later noticed what appeared to be a tan leather knife sheath lying on the bed next to Maddie's right side. The sheath was later processed and had the K-bar, I think it's K-bar, USMC, which is the United States Marine Corps Eagle Globe and Anchor insignia stamped on the outside of it. The Idaho State Lab later located a single source of male DNA left on the button snap of this knife sheath. So the sheath was left behind. We'll see if it was done. Obviously, it was not intentional. I don't believe. I think it was sloppy. And he had his DNA on the button snap. Stupid idiot. You thought you were smart, Bryan. Allegedly, Bryan, but apparently not. As part of the investigation, numerous interviews were conducted by the police department officers and FBI agents. 2 of the interviews included the roommates. And I believe this is, it's the initial. So actually, I'm not going to say their names. But they were inside the King Road residence at the time of the homicide and were roommates of the victims. 1 second, guys. Oh, perfect. Their room was located on the first floor of King's Road in the King Road residence, which we know was like that basement first floor. So, and mods, if you're in here, please, if people start getting wild and doing some victim shaming here because they are a victim, even though they survived it, please mute them, boot them, do whatever you do, because this is not meant to be a source to go after these roommates because we never know how we would react in those situations. Based on numerous interviews conducted, they have learned the following. On the evening of November 12th, 2022, Ethan and Xana are seen by one of the roommates at the Sigma Chi house on University of Idaho campus and given the address. This is from 9 p.m. to 1:45 a.m. It is also estimated that at approximately 1:45 a.m., Ethan and Xana returned to the residence. This person also stated that Ethan did not live in the residence but was a guest of Xana. No surprise there. Kaylee and Maddie were at the local bar, the Corner Club, and they can be seen on video footage provided by the Corner Club between 10 p.m. and 1:30 a.m. At approximately 1:30, Kaylee and Maddie can be seen on the video at a local food truck called the Grub Truck, given the address as well. Talks about the live stream here, and it talks about how then the private party, which is redacted, gave them a ride home at approximately 1:56 a.m. Both of these people made statements during interviews that indicated that the occupants of the home occupants of the house were home by 2 a.m. and asleep or at least in their rooms by approximately 4 a.m. This is with the exception of Xana, who received a DoorDash order at the residence at approximately 4 a.m. What's very interesting here is the time of death where the window was initially reported as 3 to 4 becomes extended in this affidavit after 4 a.m. because Xana's TikTok, which we're going to get to in a second, is apparently active around 4:15 a.m. So 1 second, guys, let me just pause really quick, come back over to the stream just to make sure I'm not missing anything or, any wild red flags. Okay. And if you need me to zoom it in a little bit more, depending on how it is on your screen, let me know. I can hit zoom one more time. Let me actually just do that just err on the side of caution and hit zoom one more time. Okay. So then as we go in, DM, these are of course initials, stated she originally went to sleep in her bedroom on the southeast side of the second floor. She stated that she was awoken at approximately 4 a.m. by what she said sounded like Kaylee playing with her dog in one of the upstairs bedrooms, which was located on the third floor. A short time later, she said she heard what she thought Kaylee was saying to the effect of, "There's someone here." A review of records obtained from a forensic download of Xana's phone showed that this could have also been Xana, as her cell phone indicated that she was likely awake and using TikTok at around 4:12 a.m. She then stated that she looked out of her bedroom but did not see anything when she heard the comment about somebody being in the house. She stated she opened her door a second time when she heard what she thought was crying coming from Xana's room. She then said she heard a male voice saying something to the effect of, "It's okay, I'm going to help you." Now, I just want to state here before we go into this next part, that could be explained. At that point, it doesn't necessarily mean that there is an intruder in the house. If you've ever been in college, you've ever been young, you've ever been drunk, you know that sometimes in relationships you argue, you fight, you get super drunk, you start crying, whether it's warranted or not, overreacting, who knows? So at that point, I think this roommate could have easily been hearing Xana crying, thinking maybe she got into a fight with her boyfriend. He's saying, "It's okay, I'm going to help you," or who knows? Nothing at this point to necessarily indicate that there was an intruder in the house. At approximately 4:17 a.m., a security camera located at the residence immediately northwest of the student's residence picked up distorted audio of what sounded like voices or a whimper, followed by a loud thud. A dog can also be heard barking numerous times starting at 4:17 a.m. The security camera is less than 50 feet from the west wall of Xana's bedroom. The roommate stated she opened her door for a third time after she heard the crying and saw a figure clad in black clothing and a mask that covered the person's mouth and nose walking towards her. She described the figure as 5'10" or taller, male, not very muscular, sorry, Bryan, but athletically built with bushy eyebrows. The male walked past her as she stood in a frozen, shocked phase. The male walked towards the back sliding glass door, and then she locked herself in her room after seeing the male. She said she did not recognize the male, and this led investigators to believe that the murder left the scene. So let me just pause really quick and make sure that nobody's getting crazy here. Hold on. Actually, you know what? That's what I'm going to do. Oh, I can't do it on my phone. I can't do it from here. I was going to make a couple of you guys mods just in case the chat's getting crazy. So at this point, it seems like she does recognize that it's an intruder. For her to say that she stood there in shock and she froze and then locked herself in her room. Well, I want to be careful how I say this because none of us would react the way we think we would. I'm sure. I do wonder why 911 wasn't called immediately in that moment. And this is kind of where I stopped reading the affidavit and then decided to jump on here and do a live. So maybe we'll get to that, but it's really unfortunate. So let's keep going. So they believe that the murderer left the scene. The combination of her statements to law enforcement, reviews of forensic downloads of records from the phones, and video of a suspect video as described below leads investigators to believe that the homicides occurred between 4 a.m. and 4:25 a.m., which would also explain that dog barking at 4:17, hearing what was going on, and barking as a reaction. During the processing of the crime scene, investigators found a latent shoe print. This was located during the second processing of the crime scene by the forensic team by first using a presumptive blood test and then the amino-black protein stain that detects the presence of cellular material. The detected shoe print showed a diamond-shaped pattern, similar to the pattern of a Vans type shoe sole, and it was just outside the door of the roommate's bedroom located on the second floor. This is consistent with the statements regarding the suspect's path of travel. As part of the investigation, an extensive search, commonly referred to in law enforcement as a video canvass, was conducted in the area of the King Road residence. This video canvass was to obtain any footage from the early morning hours of November 13th in the area of the King Road residence and surrounding neighborhoods in an effort to locate the suspect's vehicles traveling to or leaving the residence. This video resulted in the collection of numerous surveillance videos in the area from both residential and business addresses. I have reviewed numerous videos that were collected and have had conversations with the other officers, detectives, and FBI agents that are similarly reviewing the footage that was obtained. A review of camera footage indicated that a white sedan, now named Suspect Vehicle 1, was observed traveling westbound on the 700 block of Indian Hills Drive in Moscow at approximately 3:26 a.m., and westbound on the highway at approximately 3:28 a.m. On this video, it appeared that the Suspect Vehicle 1 was not displaying a front license plate. A review of footage from multiple videos obtained from the King Road neighborhood showed multiple sightings of this vehicle, starting at 3:29 a.m. and ending at 4:20 a.m. These sightings showed the vehicle make an initial 3 passes by the house and then leave via Walenta Drive. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Based off my experience as a patrol officer, this is a residential neighborhood with a very limited number of vehicles that travel in the area during the early morning hours. Upon review of the video, there are only a few cars that enter and exit this area during this time frame. Suspect Vehicle 1 can be seen entering the area a 4th time at approximately 4:04 a.m. It can be seen driving eastbound on Kings Road, stopping and turning around in front of 500 Queen Road 52, then driving back westbound on King Road. When Suspect Vehicle 1 is in front of the King Road residence, it appeared to unsuccessfully attempt to park or turn around in the road. The vehicle then continued to the intersection of Queen Road and King Road, where it can be seen completing a 3-point turn and then driving eastbound again down Queen Road. This is really scary because if he was started driving around and they got footage of him starting at 3:20 or whatever in the morning and driving in and out, it shows he was waiting, in my opinion, waiting for the right time to make his move, making sure they were home and just lurking like a creeper until he decided to park and go in. Suspect Vehicle 1 is next seen departing the area of King Road residence at approximately 4:20 a.m. at a high rate of speed. The suspect vehicle is next observed trailing southbound on Walenta Drive. Based on my knowledge of the area and review of camera footage in the neighborhood that does not show Suspect Vehicle 1 during that time frame, I believe that Suspect Vehicle 1 likely exited the neighborhood at Palouse River Drive and something Drive. I'm not even going to try to attempt that one. And it's at the southern edge of Moscow and proceeds into Whitman County, Washington. Eventually, the road leads to Pullman, Washington, which we know good old Bry lived. Pullman, Washington is approximately 10 miles from Moscow, Idaho. Both Pullman and Moscow are small college towns, and people commonly travel back and forth between them. Law enforcement officers provided video footage of Suspect Vehicle 1 to forensic examiners with the FBI that regularly utilize surveillance footage to identify the year, make, and model of the unknown vehicle that is observed by one or more cameras during the commission of a criminal offense. The forensic examiner has approximately 35 years in law enforcement experience with 12 years at the FBI. His specific training includes identifying unique characteristics of vehicles, and he uses a database that gives visual clues of vehicles across states to identify differences between vehicles. After reviewing the numerous observations of Suspect Vehicle 1, the forensic examiner initially believed that the vehicle was a 2011 to 2013 Hyundai Elantra. Upon further review, he indicated it could also be a 2011 to 2016 Hyundai Elantra. As a result, investigators have been reviewing information on persons in possession of this vehicle between the years of 2011 to 2016. Investigators were given access to video footage of the Washington State University campus located in Pullman, Washington. A review of that video indicated that approximately at 2:44 a.m. on the 13th, a white sedan, which was consistent with the description of the white Elantra, known as Suspect Vehicle 1, was observed on WSU surveillance cameras traveling north on Southeast Nevada Street at Northeast Stadium Way. At approximately 2:53 a.m., a white sedan, which is consistent with the Elantra, was observed traveling southeast on Nevada Street in Pullman, Washington, towards SR 270. SR 270 connects Pullman to Moscow. This camera footage was provided to the same FBI forensic examiner. The forensic examiner identified the vehicle observed in Pullman, Washington as being a 2014 to 2016 Hyundai Elantra. At approximately 5:25 a.m., A white sedan, which was consistent with the description of the suspect vehicle, was observed on 5 cameras in Pullman, Washington, and on WSU campus cameras. The first camera that recorded the white sedan was located at 1300 Johnson Road in Pullman. The white sedan was observed traveling northbound on Johnson Road. Johnson Road leads directly back to the West Palos River Drive in Moscow, which intersects with that other name that I'm not going to attempt to say. The white sedan was then observed turning north on Bishop Boulevard and northwest on SR 270. At approximately 5:27 a.m., the white Elantra was observed on cameras traveling northbound on Stadium Way at Nevada Street, Stadium Way at Grimes Way, Stadium Drive at Wilson Road, and Stadium Way at Cougar Way. And then let's see, here's a little map hitting all of those spots. We've still got 10 pages to go, guys, so sorry it's taken a while, but there's a lot to go over. Let me just look at something actually really quick. Oh, this affidavit is from the 29th of December, 12/29/22. Okay. I hope you guys are all behaving yourself in the chat because I'm not monitoring, and I hope the mods are monitoring it well. If I need to slow it down further, just Okay. So this just shows the path of travel, but says it's not to scale. It's a little blurry and hard to see here. So what I'm going to have to do is enhance and lighten these images so you can see it better, because I'm guessing this is a photocopy and that's why it's so distorted, but it gives you the path of travel. On November 25th, 2022, MPD asked area law enforcement agencies to be on the lookout for this car. On November 29th, 2022, at approximately 12:28 a.m., WSU police officer Daniel Tiengo queried white Elantras registered at WSU. As a result, he located a 2015 white Elantra with a Pennsylvania license plate. This vehicle was registered to Bryan Kohberger. Wow. Residing at, there's his apartment. His apartment is approximately 3/4 of a mile from the intersection of Stadium Way and Cougar Way, the last camera location that picked up the white Elantra. This is really interesting. So they got Bryan's name on November 29th. Now, one of the things we've been talking about, everybody's been talking about, is did law enforcement drop the ball, even though they were able to make an arrest in, I think it was 6 or 7 weeks or whatever that timing was, which is pretty quick for an investigation. There was a lot of speculation that it was a botched investigation, that they weren't finding the leads as quickly as they should have. And right here, it says that on November 29th, they got Bryan's name and matched it to that car. So that, in my belief, and we'll know more as we continue, is when this investigation really ramped up, which is 2 weeks, not 2 weeks after the murders, not long at all. I mean, so they have, there's a reason they've been silent. So all of us who have been impatient we need to obviously know better in the future, but they've been silent for a reason, because they haven't probably wanted to spook Bryan. They haven't wanted to let him know that they were onto him, that they had his name, anything like that. But they've been sitting on this and have known for a while. Okay, sorry. A couple mods are saying I need to slow the chat more. So hold on, guys, and then we'll continue. Once it slows, we'll go back to normal. Which it's so crazy. I mean, at this point, he's identified through his car, which isn't, of course, DNA evidence that links him to the scene, but then leaving that sheath behind that had the DNA on the button snap, probably left it by accident. It's like, there's your, the smoking gun right there. Idiot. Not so smart now, are you, Bryan? Okay, sorry. Let's keep going. So they identify that Bryan owns an Elantra. That same day at approximately 2:58 a.m., WSU officer was looking for the white Elantra and located a 2015 white Elantra at 1630 Northeast Valley Road in Pullman in the parking lot. It's an apartment complex that houses WSU students. Officer Whitman also ran the car and it returned to Bryan with a Washington tag. I reviewed Bryan's Washington state driver's license information and photograph. This license indicates that Bryan is a white male with a height of 6 feet and weighs 185 pounds. Additionally, the photograph of Bryan shows that he does have the bushy eyebrows that the roommate had described to police prior. Bryan's physical description is consistent with the description of the male that DM saw inside the King Road residence on November 13th. Further investigation, including a review of the Sheriff's Department Deputy Duke's body cam and reports, showed that on August 21st, 2022, Bryan was detained as part of a traffic stop that occurred in Moscow, Idaho. At the time, Bryan, who was the sole occupant, was driving a white 2015 Elantra with Pennsylvania plates, which was set to expire on November 30th, 2022. During the stop, which was recorded via a law enforcement body cam, Bryan provided his phone number, which is redacted, and his telephone number. As his telephone number. Investigators conducted electronic database queries and learned that the phone number is a number issued by AT&T. On October 14th, 2022, Bryan was detained as part of a traffic stop by a WSU police officer. Upon review of that body cam footage and report, Kohberger was the sole occupant and was driving the white 2015 Elantra with the Pennsylvania plates. On November 18th, 2022, according to Washington State Licensing, Bryan registered the 2015 white Elantra with Washington and later received Washington plates. Prior to this time, the Elantra was registered in Pennsylvania, which does not require a front license plate to be displayed, and this was learned through communications with a Pennsylvania officer who is currently certified in the state of Pennsylvania. Based on my own experience and communication with Washington law enforcement, I know that Idaho and Washington require front and back license plates to be displayed. Investigators believe that Bryan is still driving the 2015 Elantra because his vehicle was captured on December 13th, 2022 by a license plate reader in Colorado. Bryan's Elantra was then queried on December 15th, 2022 by law enforcement in Hancock County, Indiana. On December 16th at approximately 2:26 p.m., surveillance showed Bryan's Elantra in Albrightsville, Pennsylvania. The sole occupant of the vehicle was a white male whose description was consistent with Bryan. Bryan has family in Albrightsville, Pennsylvania, which was learned through a TLO search and located to a database query. Based on information provided on the WSU website, Bryan is currently a PhD student in criminology at Washington State University. Pursuant to records provided by a member of the interview panel for Pullman Police Department, we learned that Bryan's past education included undergraduate degrees in psychology and cloud-based forensics. These records also showed Bryan wrote an essay when he applied for an internship with the Pullman Police Department in the fall of 2022. What? Wow. Applied for an internship with the police department in the fall of 2022. Would you look at that? Bryan wrote in his essay that he had interest in assisting rural law enforcement agencies with how to better collect and analyze technological data in public safety operations. Hold up, guys. Let me just read that again. He wrote an essay to apply for an internship with Pullman Police Department in the fall, just a couple months before the murders, and in the essay said that he had interest in assisting law enforcement agencies in rural areas, that's an interesting piece, with how to better collect and analyze tech data for public safety operations. Okay, let me just pause there really quick and go to the chat here. This is crazy because we already know he was studying criminology, but if he was also trying to become, a part of the police department, was that to learn more techniques to better cover his future crimes? Was he planning all of this? Or was it to find victims in rural areas? And then be inside on the investigation to be able to cover his tracks better. This is bananas. Wow. So not only did he study criminology, learn all of that stuff, but he also wanted an in with law enforcement. Wow. All right. Jeez. Okay, Bryan also posted a Reddit survey which can be found by an open source internet search. The survey asked for participants to provide information to understand how emotions and psychological traits influence decision making when committing a crime. As part of this investigation, law enforcement obtained search warrants to determine cell devices that utilized cell towers in close proximity to the King Road residence on November 13th between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. After determining that Bryan was associated to both the Elantra and the phone, investigators reviewed these search warrant returns. A query of the phone in these returns did not show the phone number utilizing cell tower resources in close proximity to the residence between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. That's interesting. So did he leave his phone at home? Based on my training experiences and conversations with law enforcement officers that specialize in the utilization of cell phone telephone records as part of investigations, individuals can either leave their cell phone at a different location before committing a crime or turn their cell phone off prior to going into the location to commit a crime. Okay, so yeah. This is done by subjects in an effort to avoid alerting law enforcement that a cellular device associated with them was in a particular area where the crime is committed. I also know that on numerous occasions, subjects will surveil an area where they intend to commit a crime prior to the date of the crime. Depending on the circumstances, this could be done a few days before or for several months prior to the commission of a crime. During these types of surveillance, it is possible that an individual would not leave their cell phone at a separate location or turn it off since they do not plan to commit the offense on that particular day. That's very interesting. So it's saying, summing it up, his phone didn't ping the night of the crime near the house. So he either turned it off or left it at home, obviously trying to be smart because he's a criminology major. But what they're saying is that oftentimes, even though a criminal will leave their phone behind the day they're committing the crime, when they're canvassing the area and when they're doing their lurking and they're spying ahead of time, trying to find a target, find a house, case the house, whatever it is, because they're not committing the crime on that very day, oftentimes they will be stupid and bring their phone with them. So now they go into where they applied for a warrant for historical data. On December 23rd, 2022, I applied for and was granted a search warrant for historical phone records between November 12th and November 14th for the phone held by the provider AT&T, which is approximately 24 hours preceding and following the times of the homicides. I'm wondering if in order to get a warrant, if it has to be 24 hours or less on, bookending the time of a crime, because I would imagine you can't just say, hey, I want everything for 2022 in there if there's not other evidence that ties him to that yet that's like strong enough evidence. But because I would imagine they would have cast a wider net, a wider date range if they could. So I wonder if there's some sort of parameters they have to stay within on that. So they were granted this. On December 23rd, pursuant to that search warrant, I received records for the phone from AT&T. These records indicated that the phone is subscribed to Bryan Kohberger at an address in Albright, Pennsylvania, and the account has been open since June 23rd, 2022. These records also included historical cell site location information for the phone. After receiving this information, I consulted with an FBI agent, an FBI special agent that is certified as a member of the Cellular Analysis Survey Team. Members of CAST are certified with the FBI to provide expert testimony in the field of historical CSLI and are required to pass extensive training that includes both written and practical exams prior to being certified, as well as the completion of yearly certification requirements. Additionally, the FBI CAST SA that I consulted with has over 15 years of federal law enforcement experience, which includes 6 years with the FBI. From information provided by CAST, I was able to determine estimated locations for the phone from November 12th to November 13th, the time period that was authorized by the court. So apparently, yes, the court will only authorize a certain time period. Okay. On November 13th at approximately 2:42 a.m., the phone was utilizing cell phone resources that provide coverage to 1630 Northeast Valley Road, apartment G201, Pullman, Washington, which is Bryan's residence. At approximately 2:47, the phone utilized resources that provided coverage southeast of Bryan's residence, consistent with the phone leaving the residence and traveling south through Pullman, Washington. This is consistent with the movement of the white Elantra. At approximately 2:47 a.m., the phone stops reporting to the network, which is consistent with either the phone being in an area without cellular coverage, the connection to the network being disabled, such as putting the phone in airplane mode, or that the phone is turned off. The phone does not report to the network again until approximately 4:48 a.m., at which time it utilized cellular resources that provide coverage to Idaho State Highway 95 south of Moscow, Idaho, near Blaine, Idaho. Between 4:50 and 5:26 a.m., the phone utilizes cellular resources that are consistent with the phone traveling south on Idaho State Highway 95 to Genesee, Idaho, then traveling west towards Uniontown, Idaho, and then back into Pullman, Washington. So we don't know if he turned his phone on airplane mode, if he turned it off, what he did. But as soon as he starts to leave his apartment, he shuts it off, knowing he doesn't want his, footsteps to be traced. Then after he leaves the crime scene and he's on the highway heading back to Washington, beep, he turns it right back on. Honestly, for being a criminology student and a PhD guy, not very bright. Just leave the phone at home the entire time. Anyways, sorry, and I'm not trying to give advice to future criminals here. At approximately 5:30 a.m., the phone is utilizing resources that provide coverage to Pullman, Washington, and consistent with the phone traveling back to Bryan's residence. The phone's movements are consistent with the movements of the white Elantra that is observed traveling north on Stadium Drive at approximately 5:27 a.m. Based on review of the phone's estimated locations and travel, the phone's travel is consistent with that of the white Elantra. Further review indicated that the phone utilized cellular resources on November 13th, 2022, that are consistent with the phone leaving the area of Bryan's residence at approximately 9 a.m. and traveling to Moscow. Wait, what? Specifically, the phone utilized cellular resources that would provide coverage to the King Road residence between 9:12 a.m. and 9:21 a.m. So he went back to the crime scene the next morning. What time? The 911 call wasn't until noon, right? Somebody let me know in the chat. I thought it wasn't until noon or something like that. Or was it 6 a.m.? No, I thought it was noon. Let me know in the chat. But he went back to the crime scene after just a few hours at 9 a.m. Oh, somebody saying that he went back for the sheath. Possibly, but let me just kind of debunk that for a second. It's possible when he got home and he cleaned himself up and all that, he realized the sheath was gone and missing after searching his car too. But if he had seen the roommates, which the roommate reported he did, I would assume, would have thought she would have already called 911 by then, or he wouldn't want to go back there when somebody had already seen him. So I don't know that he would go back to recover the sheath. I think he was going back to see if the police were there and look at his handiwork. We know that perps often insert themselves into investigations, going to vigils, going to the crime scene, trying to suss out information that the police know. So I think and I could be wrong, but I think it's more likely that he went back not to retrieve anything, but to see what the state of the house was in and see if police were on scene, see what was going on. Somebody saying, yes, it was around noon. So yeah, if the police hadn't even been called yet, he went there. Police weren't there yet. Why he wouldn't go back in, I don't think, to get the sheath if he had seen the roommate. I don't know. I need to think on that for a second a little more. Let me keep going here. So it shows that he was in the area between 9:12 a.m. and 9:21 a.m. And then it goes back to Bryan's residence and arrives back home at 9:32. So I don't think he ever even got out of his car. Probably he just went there and then he left his house around 9 a.m. and he was back by 9:30. That's a quick round trip because we know it's about 15 minutes one way from each of their places. So he probably just went to drive by to see what the situation was or be a creepy looky-loo from afar and then drove back home. Below is a depiction, not to scale, of the possible route taken based on the cellular data. Let's see. So yeah, here you can see it's just one big loop and then goes back. Jeez. Investigators found that the phone did connect to a cell phone tower that provides service to Moscow on November 14th, the day after the murders, but investigators do not believe that the phone was in Moscow on that date. The phone has not connected to any towers that provide service to Moscow since that date. So he got this phone back in June. So he either has a second phone or he never returned back to Moscow with the phone after that first time he returned to the house. Whether that was or he did return and he had his phone off. We don't know. So we don't know if he did go to the vigil. We don't know no. But no, because it says ever since that date either. So we don't know if he did go back or if he just had his phone off. All right. Based on my training experience and the facts of the investigation thus far, I believe that Bryan who is the user of the phone, was likely the driver of the white Elantra that is observed departing Pullman, Washington, and that is likely the vehicle and likely the suspect from vehicle number 1. Let's see really quick. Sorry, phone's blowing up here. Additionally, the route of travel from the phone during the early morning hours of the 13th and a lack of the phone reporting to AT&T between 2:47 a.m. and 4:48 a.m. is consistent with Bryan attempting to conceal his location during the quadruple homicide that occurred at King Road residence. On December 23, 2022, I was granted a search warrant for Bryan's historical CSLI from June 23, 2022 to current, prospective location information, and a pen register / trap and trace on the phone to aid in efforts to determine if Bryan stalked any of the victims in this case prior to the offense. I conducted surveillance on the King Road residence, was in contact with any of the victims' associates before or after the alleged offense, any locations that may contain evidence of the murders that occurred on November 13th, the location of the white Elantra registered to Bryan, as well as the location of Bryan. On December 23, 2022, pursuant to that search warrant, I received historical records for the phone from AT&T from the time the account was opened in June. Wow. After consulting with the CAST SA, I was able to determine estimated locations for the phone from June 2022 to present, the time period authorized by the court. The records for the phone show the phone utilizing cellular resources that provide coverage to the area of the King Road residence on at least 12 occasions prior to November 13th. All of these occasions, except for one, occurred in the late evening and early morning hours of their respective days. Oh my gosh. One of these occasions on August 21st, the phone utilized resources providing coverage to the King Road residents at approximately 10:34 p.m. to 11:35 p.m. At approximately 11:37 p.m., Bryan was stopped by the county sheriff's deputy as mentioned above. Was this that traffic stop? The phone was utilizing cell phone resources consistent with the location of the traffic stop during this time frame. So, and I don't know if this is true, guys, but what I gather by reading this is he started stalking them in August as targets. And then he visited their location 12 times between August and the night of the murder, or the early morning of the murder, I should say, which August 21st is approximately 3 months. 3 months of stalking them. Unless I'm missing something here, which tell me in the chat. That is horrible. And we know Kaylee had, said she had a stalker, and I don't know the exact details. I know part of that was debunked, but part of it wasn't. Could that have been him? And also for the timing, always to be in the middle of the night or the late night hours, shows that he wasn't just in the area hanging out necessarily, unless maybe he was at a nearby bar, which I doubt. Maybe, I don't know. But it seems more in line that he was stalking their movements for 3 months before these murders took place. That is really freaking scary. All right, let's keep going here. Further analysis of the cell phone data provided showed that the phone utilized cell phone resources on November 13th, consistent with the phone traveling from Pullman, Washington to Lewiston, Idaho via the Highway 195. At approximately 12:36 p.m., the phone utilized resources that would provide coverage to Kate's Cup of Joe coffee stand, located at 810 Port Drive, Clarkston, Washington. Surveillance footage from the U.S. Chef store located at 820 Port Drive, Clarkston, Washington, and adjacent to Kate's Cup of Joe showed a white Elantra consistent with suspect vehicle 1 drive past Kate's Cup of Joe at a time consistent with the cell phone data. At approximately 12:46 p.m., the cell phone then utilized. Sorry, hold on. Let me go back up really quick. This was on the 13th, did I say, or the 14th? The 13th. So noon, right after the 911 call was made. This is where this footage took place. So he drove past Kate's Cup of Joe at a time consistent with the cell phone. Okay. and that was caught on footage. At approximately 12:46 p.m., the phone then utilized cell data in the area of Albertsons grocery store at 400 Bridge Street in Clarkston, Washington. Surveillance footage obtained from the Albertsons showed Bryan exit the white Elantra consistent with suspect vehicle 1 at approximately 12:49 p.m. Interior surveillance cameras showed Bryan walk through the store, purchase unknown items at the checkout, and leave at approximately 1:04 p.m. And it shows his possible path. So he was going to Albertsons. One second, guys. Additional analysis of records for the phone indicated that between approximately 5:32 p.m. and 5:36 p.m., the phone utilized cellular resources that provide coverage to Johnson, Idaho. The phone then stops reporting to the network from approximately 5:36 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. That is consistent with the phone being in the area that the phone traveled in the hours immediately following the suspected time that the homicides occurred. Not immediately following, because unless that's supposed to be an AM. No. So that's the day. The murders happened in the early morning hours of the 13th. So then he's seen passing the coffee shop at noon. Then he goes to Albertsons around 1, leaves Albertsons at 1. Then at 5, he's driving around, turns his phone off at 5:30 to 8:30 that night. Could that be because he went back to the crime scene? Because now the police are all over it. The news reporters are there. Everything's going down. Was he there at the crime scene? What do you guys think? And turned his phone off. And that was that night. And maybe when he went back at 9 a.m., he thought now that I think through it, that makes complete sense. If he went back that morning at 9 a.m., assuming that the roommate who had seen him called 911 as he fled through the sliding door, he would have gone back at 9 a.m. to see the crime scene, to see the police there, the news reporters there. But he drives up, he realizes that nobody's there, nobody's called 911 yet. So then he leaves, goes and gets a cup of coffee, goes to Albertsons, then drives back to see, surely they, and I'm sure he saw it on social media at that point too, but surely the police have been called. So then he turns his phone off for 3 hours and is probably one of the many people at the house watching everything unfold. God. All right, let's see. Let's keep going. On December 27th, 2022, Pennsylvania agents recovered the trash from the family residence located in Albrights, Pennsylvania. That evidence was sent to the Idaho State Lab for testing. Okay, let me just say this. Let me keep reading. On December 28th, 2022, the Idaho State Lab reported that a DNA profile obtained from the trash and the DNA profile obtained from the sheath identified a male as not being excluded as the biological father of the suspect profile. At least 99.999% of the male population would be expected to be excluded from the possibility of being the suspect's biological father. Based on the information above, I am requesting an arrest warrant be issued for Bryan Kohberger, born 1994, for burglary and for 4 counts of murder in the first degree for the murders of Madison, Kaylee, Xana, and Ethan. So with this, and it doesn't say all of the details with the DNA profile collected from the sheath, but the trash. And again, there were pieces of information from my last video when I had said, that I had a source close to the investigation who said that the sheath was left behind, but that it was under Ethan's body, and that the agents in Pennsylvania posed as garbage men to collect trash to then match to the DNA. Pieces of that were true. The sheath was found next to Maddie's body. It wasn't found under Ethan's body, but it was left at the scene. So that piece of information was, in fact, it does check out. And them posing as garbage men to collect trash to then match back to the DNA that they had also matches out. So I can't help but wonder if the other information that was shared regarding Ethan being sliced, his legs being sliced to his hamstrings, and the 54 stab wounds on one of the girls, and then another girl's face being beaten so badly it was sunken in. I wonder if those are true, especially given that second or third page of this affidavit is completely redacted where it goes into Ethan's autopsy. It's still alleged all at this point, but little antidotes of that information that I was given have now been proven apparently to be true. So I can't help but wonder if that is true, and that's why that was redacted as well. Okay, let me pop back over here to the chat for a second, guys. Let me pull this down for a sec and see what you guys are saying. And this is a good point. I had said 23andMe as like the DNA match source, which I have to clarify 100%, but I think it could have been somebody when they're explaining this, like, oh, that it was matched DNA to a 23andMe type thing, almost like as if you were to call an Uber or a Lyft or a Juno, which not many people have Juno, but if you lived in New York, you had Juno. And instead of just being like, oh, I called a Juno specifically, be like, oh yeah, so then she called an Uber, she called a car, like more of like a generic term, like they matched it with 23andMe, even if it was one of the other branches of genealogical DNA. I don't know. And it's, again, it's all alleged, guys. But I could see where maybe that was mistaken, since apparently 23andMe doesn't necessarily give information to law enforcement. So I've heard. So I think it's interesting here that the roommate saw Bryan, heard crying, saw Bryan in a mask flee the house, but didn't call 911. And that was at 4 a.m. So what I want to know, and it hasn't been released yet, I'm sure it will be soon, it's just a matter of time, that 911 call. There's been so many different rumblings of somebody saw somebody passed out. It was the roommate who called 911. They saw somebody unconscious. It was somebody who saw the blood and then fainted. We don't really know what the truth is there, but I just wonder, why did 8 hours go by until 911 was called? That seems crazy to me. And I don't think it's her fault at all, because again, we don't know how we would react and what our response would be if we were the ones in that situation. But I don't know. I don't know. Something just isn't making sense to me here. And so from what I've heard is that, yes, he was wearing a mask that covered apparently his mouth and his nose. It says it was a masked individual in the affidavit. From what I have heard, and I don't know if this is entirely true, it wasn't an actual true mask. It was a turtleneck or like one of those what are those ski masks kind of things called? The ones that go like up to here, like something pulled up like that, not like a true mask. That's what I have heard. It says in here that he was masked and his mouth and his nose was covered. I agree. I'm just going to go to some of these comments here. I'd be more scared that the guy would come back. Exactly. If you just witnessed something, and if you heard somebody say, I think somebody's here, you heard crying, you see this guy who's masked with bushy eyebrows that you don't recognize, who's 6 foot tall, then leave out the sliding glass door, and you're so scared that you freeze and you lock yourself in your room, who's to say that person isn't coming back to kill you? Why wouldn't you call 911? Unless she was so drunk, unless she was under the influence of something else and was scared if the police came, she'd get in trouble. I don't know. And again, I don't know how you would react in a situation like that. But the fact that 911 wasn't called until noon, I agree. I think that she probably was in a state of shock. But then if she was in, and again, luckily, I have never been in a situation where I have been, actually, I take that back. Well, kind of. I've never been so traumatized to where I've been frozen in a state of shock once when I was suffering from postpartum depression. But it's a whole different situation. But if she was frozen because she was so scared, was she frozen for 8 hours until she called the police? Possibly. I don't know how that works. I don't know, what your mind does when you are going through a trauma like that. It's really scary. And the fact that he stalked these kids, I guess I know they're adults, but kids, for 3 months before the murders, and then had the, wherewithal to turn his phone off when he went there to then revisit the scene of the crime, so sick and twisted, accidentally what would have happened? And I guess we have to talk through this, and I have to think through this. This is why I don't like coming live all the time, because I like to marinate on things and think through my process and what I actually believe to be true. But I can't help but wonder, had he not accidentally left that sheath behind with the DNA on it? Sure, they had the footage of the Elantra, his cell phone records, but there wouldn't have been, because they said there was so much mixed contaminated DNA because it was an open party house, would there have been direct DNA that tied him to these murders enough to charge him? if he hadn't made the mistake and left that sheath behind. Because all of the DNA that they're citing in this affidavit that matched back to the garbage that they collected and how they ruled everything out was from the DNA left on the button snap of the sheath. It wasn't DNA left on the kitchen sink. It wasn't DNA left on the victim. It wasn't anything like that. It goes back to the sheath. So had he not left the sheath behind, would he even be charged right now with the murders? Because the footage and the cell phone is all circumstantial evidence. Everything is. So I don't know. That's a pretty happy accident if he accidentally left that behind. That's really scary. That I'm seeing some of you guys say maybe she blacked out, maybe she passed out, which yeah, maybe she did, maybe for 8 hours, I don't know. Or maybe that's actually a really good point. Maybe because there have been those reports that, which we don't again know the exact facts, but the reports that somebody called 911 because of somebody who was unconscious, and everybody was like, if you saw somebody unconscious who was just murdered, surely you'd see all the blood. What do you think? They're just why wouldn't you report them as murdered? Why would you say they're unconscious? Maybe the other roommate found this roommate passed out, and from the shock and trauma she was in, and she called the police, reporting her, not reporting the murders, and then maybe they discovered the bodies later. That certainly would make that story make more sense. That's possible. So maybe Bethany's the one who called the police to report Dylan as being unconscious. I don't know. What do you guys think? And maybe she was passed out that entire time from the shock. That would make way more sense than somebody calling 911 and reporting there's somebody unconscious when there's like, a gruesome, bloody crime scene. So let me pull this up. Sandy's asking, why did he just walk by the other roommate? Let me just pull this text up that I read the other day again, because we talked about this in my video yesterday, because it says, one of the cops said, the girl I work with knows one of the cops who said that the girl in the basement who survived went by the staircase and she thought it was Ethan and yelled at him to shut the F up, but it was actually the killer, Bryan. And the killer left after he saw her. She didn't know it was him, though, at the time, which this 100% aligns with what we just read. So I think, and what I had said in my previous video is I think it's certainly possible that the reason he didn't go after Dylan or go to kill her if she was down a flight of stairs in that first floor and she saw him upstairs right by the sliding door, she saw the figure, she didn't recognize him, she saw the mask, she got scared, she froze. I think it's possible he ran out because he either was physically exhausted from just murdering 4 people and needed to get the hell out of there and wasn't expecting to see somebody else down there, or because it was down a flight of stairs and in another room, he didn't know who else was down there. Could he have been overpowered? If there was a second person down there, would the second person call 911? Would he be caught? What would the likelihood change of him being caught by going downstairs to kill more people rather than just fleeing and jetting out in the dark? So I think that's possibly why, which it's like, we've talked about survivor's guilt before on here. And it's like, at that point, how do you reconcile like, oh my God, my life was spared by chance, basically. I also had mentioned in that video, my theory of why he didn't kill her after seeing her is because he didn't expect anybody down there. Because if you remember the layout of the house with the first, second, and third floor, everybody was in confusion when this case first emerged. Who was on the first floor? What's technically the first floor? Is that a basement? So even though he cased this house apparently for 3 months ahead of time, by looking at it from the outside, you would think that that's a basement. You wouldn't necessarily jump to the conclusion that people reside there. So if he entered in on that second floor, that sliding glass door, and killed the 4 people who were in there and didn't know that anybody else was down there, which I'm sure he didn't. Otherwise, I would imagine he would have worked his way up or down. Like, I don't think he would start here, go there, go there. Then to be caught off guard by this person and not know what's down there, I would think you would just run. If you're right by the sliding glass door, you would just get the hell out of there. I would, at least. I don't know that I would go down there and try to risk getting caught or being overpowered or, anything else, but I don't know. Oh, okay. Let me go back to that. It says DM was on the second floor, not the basement. Let's see. I thought it said that they were in different rooms. Let me pull this back up, because I thought it was on the first floor. Let me see here. Okay. They were roommates of the victims. Bethany's bedroom was located on the first floor. Let's see. Dylan and Bethany both made statements that the occupants were home by 2 a.m. Okay, hold on. Let me go back down to the rooms. Dylan stated she originally went to sleep in her bedroom on the second floor. She was then awoken by what she said was Kaylee playing with her dog, which is on the third floor. Yep, let's see, hold on. Originally went to sleep in her bedroom on the second floor. What does that mean, originally? Then she looked out of her bedroom when she heard Xana crying. I guess that doesn't make sense then, because it says Dylan stated she opened her door for a third time after she heard the crying and saw a figure in black clothing and a mask that covered the person's mouth and nose walking towards her. He walked past her as she stood in a frozen shock phase. The male walked towards the back sliding glass door, and then she locked herself in the room. So I guess she wasn't on the basement level. I need to pull up the layout of the house again, because it says he walked past her to the back sliding glass door. So did he literally walk directly past her? That is bizarre. That makes this even weirder. No, I don't think Bryan was crying. Xana was crying, and she heard Xana crying, and then she heard a guy say, "Don't worry, I'm going to help you," which I don't know if that was Bryan or if that was Ethan. I'm guessing maybe Xana was crying because she saw what he had done to Ethan or was doing to Ethan, and maybe he said to her, "Don't worry, I'm going to help you." Or maybe he didn't say it in a caring way. Maybe he said it in like, "Don't worry, I'm going to help you." Like, so you forget. I don't know. That's really freaking creepy. Yes, Zen, please, if anybody continues victim blaming, just boot them, because that's not what this is about. We don't know how we would behave in that situation. None of us do. I also want to just say, guys, thank you. I saw, as I was going through the affidavit, some of the super chats roll through. I don't know how on StreamYard to go back through chat history and pull them up on screen. I'm really sorry. If somebody knows how to do that, please send me an email, because I cannot for the life of me figure out how to do it. Once the chat has passed so much. So I apologize, but I saw them, and I appreciate it. Thank you very, very much. More slow mode. I thought I already slowed it enough. Let me slow it a little bit more. Hold on. Sounds like Dylan did move upstairs to the empty room. Yes, hold on. Let me find this comment here. Okay. The home baker. Why did he get a new phone in 2022? That's when it was put in service. Yes, the phone was put in service in June of 2022, which is odd, because then he started stalking them apparently in August, just a couple months later. I don't know if this is his primary phone, if he has two phones, if this was a second phone. The fact that it was registered to Albrights, Pennsylvania makes me wonder if it was under mommy and daddy's phone plan. I don't know. It's with AT&T. That's all that we know. So I do think that's interesting that it was in June, because how often do you really like change carriers, change phone plans, get a new phone? Sure, but change carriers, not very often. I've had Sprint. It's now T-Mobile, which don't come for me. I know that's, they're not the best. I was always a Verizon person through and through, but it's like such a pain in the ass to change carriers that I'm still with them 10 years later. So it is interesting. Maybe it was a second phone that he got. Oh man, I'm like sweating in here with these lights, which is crazy because it's such a rainy day. He even changed his license plate number. Yes, but also I believe, and I'm going to go back, because I'm going to just like go back through this affidavit with a fine tooth comb. I believe it said that his registration was due to expire on the 30th of November anyway. So before renewing his Pennsylvania registration, it would make sense that he registered it in Washington and then got new plates, because I believe it was like a week before that. So, and again, I want to go back and double check that, but that doesn't strike me as too weird, because I did see some reports earlier. I think it was on, must have been the Daily Mail, which I know Daily Mail isn't the most credible, but something about how he changed his license plate or changed his tags to evade police. It sounds like his registration was going to expire the 30th anyway. So if he was living in Washington, it makes sense that he would register the car in Washington, and boom, just a bonus that it happens to be different than the plates they would have been looking for before. Kara, you're saying you don't think it's his first time. I agree also. I don't know, actually, because it could either be that he was very skilled in this because he studied it, or because he has committed a crime before. And I say skilled in this not because he evaded police for so long, because it wasn't really that long of a period of time at all. We know they got his name the end of the month of November, but if there wasn't any other DNA to tie him back to besides the sheath snap button, that is a lot of skill to commit 4 horrific stabbings and not leave DNA behind, unless it was that he did leave DNA behind. It was just so contaminated based on so many people being in that house that they couldn't exclude or single it out and source it. To turn off his phone when he approached the residence, I don't think you have to be a killer to know to do that. I think anybody watching a documentary would know to do that. I would think that you would leave your phone behind entirely and you wouldn't turn it back on. So I don't know if he's committed a crime before. Possible. What irks me the most in this is that he stalked them for 3 months, and that while he was stalking them, he tried to get a job with the police department, or tried to intern for them, as he was stalking and probably planning this quadruple murder. He was trying to get employment with law enforcement. That is freaking crazy to me. And I just wonder, now let's talk really quickly about his public defender in Idaho, Ann Taylor. I haven't done a deep dive on the case yet, but apparently she was able to either exonerate somebody or throw out a case that may be entirely against a murder suspect, I believe, which you in the chat probably know much more about this than I do. But apparently she's a bulldog. Even though she's a public defender, not a super fancy, high expensive attorney, apparently she's very, very talented, very, very smart, and a bulldog. We know the day she was hired on, she went to the house, the scene of the crime, secured it, was taking photos, had her own team, trying to gather evidence. If the only true DNA link they have is that sheath button, can it be explained away? Because although it does tie in with the footage and the cell phone, it's all circumstantial. Now, I was talking with one of my friends about this the other day. I forget who it was. Actually, it might have been Will. I don't know who it was. But I was saying, even if this is all circumstantial, because he thinks he's so smart, I think he did this for notoriety, whatever the reasons are. If there is so much circumstantial evidence, could it be a mistrial, a hung jury? Could there be somebody on there who doesn't quite believe it? And I said, well, luckily, I think that he's so hated by the entire country that even if there is too much circumstantial stuff, people or reasonable doubt, people will convict him anyway. But then I was like, wait a minute, that didn't happen with Casey Anthony, obviously, when the whole world hated her. And if you watch the new documentary, don't come for me if you believe she's innocent. I'm not trying to go back and forth. But let me just say, if you're Gen Z, go watch all the original footage, because I know you think you might know what's going on. Watch all the original stuff from the trial. Anyways, let me leave that there. But it just shows that based on public opinion alone, even though it is such a high profile case and everybody knows about it, and certainly the mass population believes he's guilty already, there is a lot of reasonable doubt in there if that is the only piece of DNA evidence, at least in my opinion, which we don't know what else they have. And we don't know what else they will get after now that they have secured him and all of that. So we're also going to see what the defense puts up, because he's pled not guilty. He put that statement out that he can't wait to be exonerated. So I wonder how he's going to counter all of these pieces that are outlined in the affidavit. The status hearing is set for January 12th, I just saw. Let's see. Sorry, guys, you're going to hear me swallow this right now. Sorry, so thirsty. Okay, let's see. How is a knife considered a sexual gratification tool? Not trying to be funny, genuinely just curious. Not trying to be rude. So there's a term for it. I think it starts with a P. What is it? I have to go back and look. There's a term for it. And I talked about it a little bit in my last video, and I said a remark that I know kind of didn't sit right with people. I wasn't trying to be funny, but I called it almost like phantom limb, like phantom penis kind of thing. Like sometimes, and I forget what the medical term is, but people will use it as an appendage of their body almost, and they get the same gratification that they would get by doing that through actual penetration. And some just get off kind of like a pyromaniac gets off on seeing flames and fires and all of that. Some people get off on death and killing. So I forget what the exact medical term is. I'll get it and come back to you guys. But it's interesting because I know there has been oh, thank you. I put there. So I think too, what's interesting, where was I going with that? We were talking about the weapon. Oh, I know that there's been a lot of things circulating about that post on I don't know, is it 4chan or Fortune? I don't even know. But where it talks about how the killer used a knife on Kaylee's privates and then hung some stuff from the ceiling fan. And then was in Pennsylvania saying, I'm hiding out in the woods in Pennsylvania or whatever he had said, which is weird. It's a very big coincidence because that was posted on December 12th. And we know he was in Pennsylvania near the Poconos in the woods, so to speak, and that there have been some very gruesome, violent things here. So that had been circulating. And I think Christina Randall posted a video I had seen in some of my comments where she talks about that. Not today. I think it was yesterday or the day before, which shout out to Christina Randall. She's amazing. All of you true crimers are amazing. All the creators on here that take so much time. So I know she had talked about that a little bit. So I haven't watched it myself, but you may want to go and reference that video to see more. But it was basically a snippet, and I'm sure I could find it actually if I just do a quick Google search. And I'm sure you guys have seen it, so you don't need to see it. But it talks about that. So it is possible. I don't know if that's true or not. I haven't heard anything about, aside from the Reddit threads and these screenshots, I haven't heard from anybody directly myself anything about the tongues being cut out, about the intestines hanging from a ceiling fan, about a knife being used on private areas of the women. All I have heard directly, not through Reddit or something like that, is that one of the women was stabbed 54 times, that one of the women's face was beaten so badly that all the bones were broken and her face was sunken in, and that Ethan's legs were sliced to the hamstrings. Those are the only pieces that I have heard, which still, even though I have heard them, they are all still continue to be alleged. All right, let's see. Also, we've talked a lot about in my last video, and I know I keep saying in my last video, but in my last video, we talked about how nobody has come forward saying that they have ever dated Bryan, that they were ever in a relationship with Bryan, or anything like that. Which, not that you would want to come forward and publicly acknowledge being associated in any romantic way to a creep like that who's accused of killing 4 people, but a lot of people are coming out of the woodworks, former classmates, former teachers, students. So I don't know how nobody has. There was one person who came out, I believe, yesterday saying that she went on a Tinder date with him and that he was super creepy and weird, that she wanted to get away. So she snuck away to the bathroom and started pretending to vomit so loudly that he would just leave. I don't know if that's true or if it's somebody just looking for clout. I have no idea. I haven't been able to vet it. But that's the only person who has come forward at all, which begs the question, was this a crime of hatred against the women, and Ethan just happened to be there because he's been rejected his whole life? According to classmates, girls used to throw things at him. He used to be overweight. They used to bully him, all these things. So did he have a hatred for them? Is he an incel? Most of you probably know what an incel is. If you don't, I believe it stands for involuntarily celibate. And it's when men usually have this hatred towards primarily women, but oftentimes also can be men, for having sex and being attractive and all of these things, to where they hate them, thinking that they are deserving and they're entitled to that. So that it's like they're projecting their own celibacy onto them and think that they're deserving of that. It's very complex and very bizarre. So look into it if you're not familiar. And I believe it stands for involuntarily celibate. So if nobody's come forward that they've dated him or have ever been in a relationship in the past, present, it doesn't matter. Was he an incel? Was this driven by hate? Was he stalking these beautiful 3 young women for months. Did he pursue one of them? Was he rejected? Did he just see how beautiful they were? That this was a party house, that they had the time of their lives. They were living their best life. They had friends. They weren't being bullied. They were having an open door house where everybody was coming and going. Everybody loved them. They were all over social media. They were gorgeous. And did that fuel his hate for them? And then Xana had a boyfriend who happened to spend the night, and that's why he was attacked in such a gruesome way, allegedly, because he just happened to be there. I don't know. What do you guys think? It definitely seems targeted if he had been stalking them for 3 months. It also, based on the crime scene itself, what we know of regarding the wounds and the autopsy, that it was targeted and that one person's injuries didn't match the others and that it was more brutal on one of them. What was the reason for that? Or we've been talking about, were the girls the target this whole time? Was Ethan the target? Was he pissed that Ethan was in this house of hot girls and he couldn't get a girl to save his life? Maybe. Possibly. Maybe Ethan spent the night there all the time and he knew it from casing the house for 3 months. And maybe he was the target and also wanted to kill the girls because of his hatred for that. Who knows? I feel like there's so many theories and there's so many different ways it could go. So I'm curious to know what you guys think. Let's see. Oh, all right. Okay, so I'm going to go back through this affidavit. I'm going to kind of go through with fine tooth comb. I'm going to watch the hearing that took place since I missed it, since I was live. I'm going to go pop over to my good guy, Bryan Enton, because I love what he does and talks about, and I want to hear his insights. And then I'll come back with you guys with a pre-recorded video, kind of just wrapping everything up, the new information we get between now and the end of day today, because tons of new information is going to come out. And I'll do another video before the weekend, hopefully, that kind of gives you guys a fresh update. But I appreciate you jumping on with me here so quickly and listening as we went through the affidavit. And I'm curious to know what you guys think. So let me know in the comments below. All right, guys, thanks again for tuning in. Please don't forget, give this video a thumbs up on your way out. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already so that you'll get notified of those updates. And we will talk again very, very soon. All right, guys, thanks again. Have a good rest of your day. Bye.